Hi, this is Maria Liberati, and you are listening to The Maria Liberati Show. You can also find me at marialiberati.com. I know we're all staying at home and doing our best to stay healthy and sane while whiling away our stay-at-home hours. But besides being a chef and author, I am a travel writer and blogger, and it's really hard to keep my feet on the ground. So my solace comes in the form of traveling through memories and reliving great experiences. This time, I'd like to take you on a trip to Italy to have some great coffee with me. And to help me do that, my guests today are Simonetta Lein, who is originally from Italy, but she's joining me in Philly. She is one of the world's top fashion influencers, and she's joining me to tell us about the fashionality of coffee. Also joining me is Philip Dobard in Los Angeles, who's from the LA Food and Drink Museum. Upon arriving in Italy, thoughts of cappuccino and cornetti flood my mind, and when my feet hit the ground, it's running for my first steamy hot cappuccino and freshly made cornetto. Nothing gives you a jolt and wakes up your taste buds like a freshly made Italian breakfast. For those of you that have no idea what a cornetto is, it is the Italian version of a croissant or a brioche. So the cornetto was first served with coffee in Vienna, but there it was called a kifler, and that type of pastry quickly spread throughout Europe. It became a croissant in France and a cornetto in Italy. Now, if you want to do a simpler old world breakfast, the original one my grandparents used to do, take a slice of crusty, day-old Italian bread, tear it into cubes, toast it in the broiler till golden and crispy. Place in a large coffee cup, sprinkle with sugar, pour in coffee, then pour in hot boiling milk. Enjoy. Coffee has been part of my life for almost as long as I can remember. While living in Italy, I became so absolutely obsessed with making a great cup of coffee, be it a short espresso or a cappuccino, part of my daily rituals, morning, mid-morning, after lunch, after dinner. It's really quite fashionable there also. So partaking in a cup of coffee means more than just drinking a beverage. But did you know that here in the USA, on a daily basis, 64% of Americans say they drink at least one cup of coffee a day. A smaller percentage, 26% of adults, say they drink only one cup, while 11% down at least 4 cups of coffee on a daily basis. But drinking coffee midday does have a beneficial effect. A coffee break between work has an effect on efficiency, job satisfaction, and of course, drinking coffee can build the company image too among employees and guests. I love the fact that many countries have their own coffee habits, culture, and brewing methods. And you can actually discover a lot about a country through tracking its coffee culture. And think about the different culture that each country exhibits through their different types of coffee. Today, I am so excited. I have Simonetta Lein as a special guest, and she is one of the top 100 fashion influencers in the world. She's an author, an entrepreneur, a top model, and she is so influential in the fashion world right now. So she makes an excellent guest for our coffee episode and finding out the fashionality of coffee. Welcome, Simonetta. Thanks so much for joining us.
But thank you. Thank you so much. And by the way, we're both in Philadelphia, so I think
Yes,
we should say that.
yes, we are both in Philly. So, yes, definitely. Simonetta, walk us through your journey from Italy to here to Philly. Myself, coming from a Philadelphia Italian market baby background, which I consider
Yes.
myself because I used to go shopping with my grandparents in the Italian market for Sunday dinner. I'm interested in learning also what took you from Italy to Philadelphia. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So my husband is originally it was born in America, but his relatives were in Italy. I will say 15 years ago, he just decided, okay, let me just go and re-meet my relatives that are in Italy and let me relearn Italian. That is actually how we met. He thought that he was staying a couple of months, and he stayed almost 12 years, basically. So that is, of course, one of the biggest motivation. We actually had a very nice life in Italy. We were living in Milan for many, many years together. And then we just said, okay, let's try, to kind of go and to the other side of the ocean in America. We have
Yes.
my in-laws, my mother and father-in-law. They live in New Jersey, and so we said, okay, let's try. And Philadelphia, a strange way came into our lives. We really didn't have anybody in the city. We just really fell in love with the city. We met an Italian woman. She has a bed and breakfast in actually Germantown, which is for people that are not from Philadelphia, is maybe you can call it a neighborhood of Philadelphia. I mean, it's technically Philadelphia, is just a little bit, outside, and there are these beautiful mansions and these beautiful, Victorian houses, and that is
Yeah.
actually where we started our journey in Philadelphia. I really like that, the architecture and the history, and so we ended up in, this beautiful, again, a Victorian house, and she is originally from Rome, and she started telling us all about her life in Philadelphia, and how much actually the Italian heritage was important in the city, and you will like it and take a look. And really, we just started chit chatting about it, and after 6 months we found each other, like looking at each other, say, okay, maybe we are buying something. And that's actually what happened. That a friend of ours, a realtor that was actually introduced to us from one of this from this lady, actually, he called us. We were in Italy, and he said, are you ready to change your life? And we're like, what are you talking about? And he said that there was this beautiful house, and actually in a beautiful neighborhood in Philadelphia, and it was available, and it was a great deal. And again, we were like, okay, let's go. We really
Wow.
literally, I don't know, felt our guts. We love the
Yes.
house. It's a beautiful, the style is actually called French eclectic, so it's
Yes.
in schist. For people
Yes.
that are, again, not from Philly, they don't
Yes.
understand the beauty of schist. It's
Yeah.
typical a stone from Philadelphia. So these houses are,
Yes.
they are fresh during the summer, and, warm during the winter. And the style,
Yes.
it's beautiful. And I have, beautiful land, beautiful history. I mean, in my
Yes.
backyard, I can look at actually this back lane where George Washington used to march. And I
Yes.
have the Grace Kelly's house that is, one of my neighbors. And,
Yes.
on the other side is where Frank Sinatra got married. So as an
Yes.
Italian, I felt so much history, and I
Yes.
fell in love, and we decided to stay.
Yes, so you know what? I just have to make a comment. I am so happy to hear you say all that because that is the exact way that I feel about Philly, and I appreciate all this stuff all the things you said and more. There's so much history and the architecture and the art,
Yes,
and I always have felt a lot of people that have lived here all their lives, they just take everything for granted. They don't realize it.
absolutely.
And, I feel that my living in Italy actually, when I came back, it helped me to really take notice and appreciate more the architecture and all the history and things like that because people in Italy always talk about our city as well. So it's so nice and refreshing to hear you because you feel the way I do. And I've rarely heard that except, in Italy. So I think that's really
Yes.
special. But what took your career here?
Again, in a way, it was really a decision between my husband and I
Mhm.
to really, again, to change our lives. And
Yes.
then, of course, with my life, my career came with me. So I
Yes.
came here that I was definitely, of course, a lot of people ask me, I mean, did you start everything here? I said, no, I was already working for Vanity Fair in Italy. At
Yeah.
that point, I published one of my first book for one of the biggest publishing house in the world, actually, which is Mondadori. I
Yes.
was working in television. I was doing a lot of stuff. So, of course, also my social media started from, I would say, a good point. It's just that when I came here, I of course moved everything into English because I
Yes.
often joke that I was doing it in Italian. So I
Wow.
moved everything into English. Then again, it was kind of maybe a combination of things. I always explain to people that many times, I mean, when you are Italian and you come to America and you have, of course, that Italian style that to me it's, timeless and classy,
Yes.
people immediately recognize it. And on the same way, of course, if you are in America, Italians, start looking at you like, oh, you're cool, you're in America. So in a way, it was a
Yes.
kind of a combo that worked out. Plus, eventually, all the charity work that actually I've started here in Philly. I was really backed by the city. The city really helped me. So
Oh, that's great.
my work together between again charity and fashion really worked out, and so my social media really started to kind of explode and became big. And so again, my career came, like I said, with me. Of course, it
With
was
you.
a motivation, the idea to come to America, because
Yes.
I mean, America is still the center of the world, and so for
Yes.
everything you do, right, for your career, of course, it was kind of it was calling me. I remember the first time I came to New York, and I started to see all those, beautiful different races,
Yes.
all together. And the idea that if you see, for instance, a Asian person, you immediately think that that Asian person is American, or a Russian person
Yes.
that is a Russian American. It's a beautiful feeling. So I felt immediately American, even if, of course, I'm proud of my roots, but it's something that I've never felt, in Europe. It's just something that you feel when you experience, the beauty of the American culture. And I felt like, that my soul was, I had more space, let's put it this
Yes.
way. And so also my career. And I said, let's try. And then again, different motivation with my husband. We said, let's try. And then things, started to kind of work out for the best.
Yes. And the other thing is, and I think people are finding that now with everything that's going on and everybody having to bring things in the virtual world, with
Yes.
you, a lot of what you were doing is in the virtual world. I mean, really,
Yes.
you can be anywhere, but I think it's, and you probably will agree with me, that it's a plus that you're in a great city. Philly has a lot of that, what we were just talking about, architecture and fashion, and it's inspiring too. There's a lot of good food and, the fashion and style. They're really into style. And, especially where you're at, you're next to near Grace Kelly's house, and that whole
Yes.
area has so much history. So
Yes.
probably for you, it's still inspiring, but you're probably able
Absolutely.
to locate anywhere in the world because a lot of the things you do are online and
That's very
communications.
true. I could definitely work from everywhere in the world, but a lot of people ask me why Philly, and again, I gave you so many answers. It's just a city.
Yes.
And then like I said, I mean, I live 10 minutes far from center city. If I
Yes.
need to go, I'll go in 10 minutes, but I look outside and I see birds and I see trees and I
Yes.
see, calm and quiet.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
pretty priceless, it's very
Yes.
different. I mean, it's I would say kind of unique to find a big city, because it's still the fourth largest city in America to have this,
Yeah.
type of vibe, that again. And if I
Yes.
need to be at the airport, like 20 minutes, I'm at the airport. I can travel everywhere. It's very convenient.
Exactly. That's exactly the way I feel. That's great. Well, I'm, glad to hear that and glad to hear you're enjoying Philly because like I said, it's my hometown and I really love it. Today's episode is about coffee. And as you know,
Yes,
it's really coffee is such a huge part of the regular Italian day in Italy. But I wanted to
true.
specifically ask you about because you're such a fashion expert and looked upon for your influence in the fashion world, this fashionality of coffee. I don't think people here in the US really understand there's a fashionality to coffee and going to a coffee bar in Italy. So what I wanted to ask you is maybe being an Italian, if you can tell us, what would you say, what are the biggest things you would say that differentiate the Italian coffee experience from something you would get here in the USA?
Definitely. So the idea that I've never found it. It's not that I've never found it, but I would say that it's more difficult to find here in America is the, like you were talking about, the experience of the coffee. So you go and you really sit and you get, something to eat with your coffee. It's something like here, it's, it's very, everything is very fast, so you get your coffee to go and you leave. And it's not that that culture does not exist in Italy. Sometimes, first of all, the coffee, of course, it's different. We don't have, the American coffee. We have the
Yes.
espresso. So it's, sometimes you find, especially in the early morning, people that just go at the bar and get an espresso and they drink and they go. That, of course, does exist. But that is one part of the culture. What I, again, remember about Italy and, the way that I was raised, I remember my grandmother taking me to, a nice cafeteria, and, you had to, again, to kind of dress up a little bit, and, you go there. And at that time, of course, she was getting coffee, I was getting tea, I was a child, but, with a little bit of a, sweet or a cake together. It's the entire, experience. Even when we were living in Milan, again, okay, you want to meet for, I don't know, even to talk about work or whatever. You go to the cafeteria and, again, you dress up, you sit down, you order, you talk, you stay, you enjoy. So it's all that part that it's actually very interesting, and it's part of definitely the Italian culture. Even when I go out and, for regular dinner, for instance, I have this, kind of culture of staying and, taking time. Americans usually are quicker because, again, they
Yes.
start from their coffee culture and, take it and go. So
Yes.
if we can, take something from the Italian culture, it will be definitely, a little bit the idea of, again, dressing up a little bit, and, the coffee moment, it's, a sociable moment. It's not just, it's something that, again, as Italians, we live maybe in a different way. It's a way of really talking and, like I always say, socializing, and also close deals and, talk about even important things many times.
Yes. Yes, I think it's a whole ritual, and I just love the
Yes.
way that, it's an experience. So here where just as you said, you go, to a quick place, you just grab a cup of coffee and you drink it in the car going to wherever you're going to. Whereas just as
Yes.
you said, I love in Italy just going to a coffee bar on a lazy Sunday because you get dressed up. It's an experience. Get dressed up, just as you said. Go to the coffee bar and getting a pastry with coffee. It's usually served on these beautiful plates and cups and things like that.
Yes.
And there's usually a lot of history to some of the coffee bars, correct? Places that
Absolutely.
famous artists and photographers and all. I know I love going to Cafe Greco in Rome because of all the history
Oh, very
around, right?
famous,
And
of
you
course.
think of all the writers and artists that created all these masterpieces there. So yes, I just wanted to hear that from you. I wanted our audience to hear that because I don't think they realize what an experience it is to have a cup of coffee, and you just take the time to do that. So thanks for that. And tell us, because people don't realize, but a cappuccino, when are you supposed, I
Yes.
mean, the fashionable way to drink it in Italy is when?
In the
When?
morning.
Exactly. And what happens if you drink it in the afternoon or like at night? I usually,
I mean, listen, you can do it. Like, for instance, if you go out, I don't know, maybe with your friends, again, you go out, you dress up, you can have a cappuccino and, again, maybe a piece of cake or, dessert or something. You can have it in maybe in the afternoon, but before dinner. The main
yes.
thing is that in Italy, again, it's morning, you have your cappuccino. When you go to the bar, usually you order cappuccino and brioche, which is, how can you translate the brioche that we have in
Well,
Italy? Because you don't
um,
really find that croissant,
no. Well, do they,
it's
okay, is this in Milan? Because where I've lived and where my family's from, we call it cornetto. Do you know what a
the
cornetto?
cornetto. Yes, of course,
Yes.
of
So
course,
a
of
brioche,
course.
I guess you could call, I was just wondering because, in Milan, maybe they do call it, and I've not been to Milan a whole
Brioche.
lot. I
They
mainly
call
lived in,
it brioche. It's a croissant, of course.
yes,
It's
but
just
it's,
that, it's,
no, I was just going to say
yeah,
it is croissant. You were saying we could compare. I guess
it's
would you say croissant?
croissant, I would say, yes. And then, of course, for instance, especially in the south of Italy, they love their Nutella inside their,
Yes.
croissant.
Yes. Yes. Oh my
Cappuccino and
goodness.
croissant with Nutella.
Oh my
But
goodness.
again, I don't judge if you guys like it. After your dinner, do whatever you want. It's just I just want to say it's not Italian. If they come and tell you that that is something that Italians do, we do not do that.
Exactly. And I was just kind of joking, but I just wanted to say too, if you go to if you want to look like a non-tourist, the thing that will give you away, the reason I was asking is if you order a cappuccino with your dinner, that will definitely give you away as a tourist, correct?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes. Please.
will know.
If you go to Italy, don't do that. Even
Yes.
because, Italians, they appreciate if you appreciate it and know their culture. So again, when you go to Italy, order your cappuccino. I understand it's delicious, but order in the morning. Again, you can order it maybe after lunch, maybe at 3, 4 in the afternoon, again with, a piece of cake or something. You can do that, but not with your dinner, please. Otherwise, they'll
Exactly.
look at you and say, oh, that's a tourist.
And yes, and I like what you just mentioned because I think that people when they travel, they come from America and they're going somewhere and they're just doing everything in an American way. Well, the beauty of
Yes,
the experience is if you're in Italy, try to live in that moment, try to live like the Italians so you're getting that full experience. I mean, it's wonderful that you're American, but
absolutely.
if you're in Italy, try to live like an Italian so you really get the full experience. And you're absolutely right, is to acknowledge the culture of drinking coffee, and that is cappuccino only in the morning or definitely before dinner. So I think that's great.
Yes.
And that's fun. And that was one thing I wanted to bring out. So the my last question for you is, and I know that you're also among all your other achievements, you're
Yes.
CEO of a PR firm. So you have some
Yes.
insight with your fashion and marketing for us on coffee because it's such a fashionable thing in Europe especially. So one of the things I've noticed is that in the US, before places like Starbucks and some of these other
Yes.
coffee places, coffee seemed to be in the US anyway, a beverage for people that say we're over 30. Now with
Hmm.
Starbucks, it seems to me like it's becoming something that is also, people 18 and from 18 and over drink. So is it that way? Well, tell me what you think about that. But also in Italy, is it also that way? Is it an older person's drink or just for everybody?
No, it's for everybody. And actually, if you, go in a classic Italian family, they'll start to introduce a little bit of coffee, even to their children, honestly. Just a little bit, a little sip. There are the children because they'll see, that the parents having, the espresso and say, can I have some? So they'll actually, like it. I have a little niece. She's here in America, but of course, again, we are a big Italian family. So she still didn't, she's only 3 years old, so she still didn't try the coffee itself, but she loves when we, for instance, we do some cappuccino. So she asks for the cappuccino. So right now it's only milk, but she loves the idea of having, of the foam of the milk. And, she feels like, kind of an adult. So there is that a little bit of, passing the culture of the coffee also to your children. So again, maybe you'll pass the coffee itself a little bit later, of course. But like I
Yes.
said, a little bit of a sip, a little bit of, even to your children. So it's something that in Italy we really have since a young age. Of course, the difference I would say that here in America you have all this, and I like them. I mean, all those beautiful beverage like you were, mentioning. Starbucks,
Yes.
of course, they have created all the, coffee with, I know, the latte, the matcha latte, and this and that. We don't have that.
Yes.
We have the espresso. That's it. you know
Yes.
So
And
that is of course a difference, I would say. And also of course that, like I was mentioned at the beginning, the long coffee, it's it's something that maybe has a different taste, a different vibe. But again, in Italy, it's just the espresso is something that you get introduced to since you are a child, honestly.
Yes, yes. And the one thing I do want to mention to our listeners, I think it's so funny, and you might have heard this too when you're in Italy, but I hear Americans in coffee bars, and they're so used to the lingo of Starbucks, all the different drinks. They think those are the drinks that they have in Italy. So they'll go to
No,
a
no, no,
coffee
no, no.
bar and they ask for a latte. Have you ever heard them ask for a latte? And they don't realize latte means milk in Italian. So they're just going to
Of
get a cup
course,
of
if you're gonna
milk.
say latte, they're gonna give you a cup of
A
milk. Like
cup of milk. So I always thought that
that's
was
very
funny,
true.
but yes. So here's
And
my
again, like that, like I always say, both cultures are beautiful. I like all the latte, all the stuff. And just like we were saying, if you want to go there, you should, learn a little bit. And again, do not order a latte, otherwise you'll receive a, big glass of milk.
Exactly. Well, this is, and I that's great. And what I wanted to say is, so my very last question, and I'm usually
Yes.
using this last question to all my guests on all the podcasts, is so tell me, what does food mean to you?
So food means gathering. It means family. It means when we had the day. To me, it's honestly food is, of course, it's in general, but to me, it's dinner. It's that time when the day of work has ended, and we have the availability to take maybe 30 minutes of our day and really try to cook something good. It also means my garden. It means that I'm trying really to, grow my own vegetables and my own stuff. And this is a message that I want to pass, especially right now, in this moment. If you have a piece of land, really try to do your own spices, even in your balcony, your own, vegetables. It's just so rewarding, and, they taste in a different way. It's very important that we eat healthy, that we stay healthy. And so again, it means happiness and joy and a nice table with people that just again can enjoy some time together. So again, is going back to the moment that we are all living right now. Try as much as you can, of course, if you have the luck to have a family, to enjoy the food and the family time, around the food, which to me it's one of the most important joys in life.
Yes, thank you. That is so beautiful. Thank you so much for that. Simonetta, thank you so much. And I'm hoping that as such an influential fashion person, I'm hoping that in one of my next upcoming episodes, you can I can invite you back and you can give us some more insight into the fashionality of some of the other things that we will be discussing. Thank you so much for
Absolutely.
being a part of my podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me. And we have to maybe meet or have some coffee together.
Yes, we definitely do have to have some coffee together. I can't always have breakfast at my favorite coffee bar in Rome, but sometimes I like to bring back the feeling of being in one of the elegant coffee bars there, sipping a leisurely, frothy cappuccino while pulling apart a soft, freshly baked cornetto. Wow, I can just taste that in my mind. My favorites are the whole wheat cornetto with honey inside. So good. If you want to create the perfect Rome in the morning staycation, you can make a similar cornetto with pre-made puff pastry that you can buy at any supermarket. Put some jam or Nutella or honey inside, bake, and don't forget to make yourself a cappuccino to accompany that pastry. The easiest way is to get a milk frother, use your own coffee pot to make some exceptional espresso, or if you really want a real traditional espresso, get the Italian mocha, the one that you put on your range. Top that espresso with frothy milk and enjoy those two together, cornetto and cappuccino. The only thing you will be missing, aside from the genuine pastry and cappuccino, is the people watching while you're eating. But hey, if you have your own outside terrazzo, or terrace, then eat outside al fresco. At my house, eating outside is so popular, even my fur baby, my little dog, knows what that word means. Hey, let's eat al fresco. Besides, eating al fresco adds the perfect ambiance when you're trying to have an authentic Italian meal.
We are here today with Philip Dobard. Really excited to have him lending his expertise for our topic today. You know, it's on coffee, but it's also on beverages.
Oh, it's good to be here. And wouldn't you know, I'm nursing a mug of coffee.
Oh, wow. Lucky you. I actually just finished mine. So it's like my third or fourth cup of the day. But yes, lucky you. And how are things in LA? We're here in Philly.
Wet.
Things in LA.
Things are wet. It started raining Sunday. It's going to rain through at least tomorrow.
Wow. Well, we had snow. So, but go ahead. Yes.
6 days of rain. Well, we have snow in the higher elevations.
Oh, okay. Yes. Well, we had just a little, thank goodness. But okay. Well, I guess I'll just start right in, and maybe you can tell you have a fascinating background in the history and culture of beverages. And so it's such an interesting field. And I wanted you to share with your audience what brought you into the world of food and cocktails.
That's a long story, but I'll try to make it quick.
Yes.
I grew up in New Orleans, in a Creole family whose roots, my family arrived from Brittany in the 16th. So we go way back. So Creole, by the definition of pre-purchase, those who lived in Louisiana before the Louisiana Purchase can be considered Creole. So we were native New Orleanians, truly. So I grew up in a family blessed with fine cooks. My mother was a wonderful Creole cook. My paternal grandmother was a wonderful Creole cook. Seemingly everyone in my family was immersed in the business of food and drink in one way or another. Now, my father was an accountant and my mother was a bank manager. So they weren't, but seemingly everyone else was. My paternal grandmother grew up on a sugar plantation in Acadiana, also known as Cajun country, Southwest Louisiana. Yeah. I had an uncle who was a brewmaster at Jackson Brewing Company in New Orleans. I had an uncle who his business was harvesting whatever was in season: brown shrimp, white shrimp, oysters, deer, muskrat, duck, you name it. Our freezer was always full of his. So it wasn't until I was in my 20s and living on my own that I knew what it was to have to pay for seafood. His wife, my godmother and aunt, my mother's sister, she farmed soft shell crabs. So we always had soft shell crabs in the freezer. You know how expensive those are.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Exactly. Exactly. And other family members were engaged in various aspects of the industry. So anyway, but that was not my pursuit. I went into music. I was, rock and roll. I was, I had a band in high school and all that sort of thing. And then I discovered opera. I got a degree in voice. I pursued a career as an opera singer with modest success. Then graduate school, then producing opera around the country with various companies. And then I moved into film and television, which brought me out to Los Angeles after I lived around the country. And Liz Williams, who founded the Southern Food and Beverage Museum in New Orleans in 2008, we had become colleagues at the University of New Orleans years before that. We always said we were going to find a way to work together again at some point. And in 2010, the call came and she said, I want to talk to you about working together again. I said, well, how's this going to work? You're in New Orleans running the Southern Food and Beverage Museum, and I'm in Los Angeles working in film and television. She goes, hear me out. I want to create a multi-city sort of network of museums where we tell the story of food and drink on a regional basis. And so being, a socialized megalomaniac, no pursuit is worth pursuing unless you can empire, that sort of thing. So we founded the Pacific Food and Beverage Museum brand here in Los Angeles and started programming under it.
Yes.
5 years after that, I think it was 2013, the Museum of the American Cocktail, which had been renting space from the Southern Food and Beverage Museum in New Orleans, asked us whether we would be interested in merging. So we took them in. It became one of our collections. And it entered my portfolio as vice president of what became the National Food and Beverage Foundation. So we started programming very intensively in Los Angeles under the Museum of the American Cocktail. Cutting to the chase here, as it were, in 2019, we formed the Center for Culinary Culture here in Los Angeles as the parent of what's now called the Cocktail Museum and the Los Angeles Food and Drink Museum, formerly the Pacific Food and Beverage Museum. So now we're an independent organization. New Orleans is still doing their thing, but they have refocused their efforts on just Southern cuisine.
Oh, okay. And I think it's so interesting too, because that what you've been talking about and saying is every time making comments about people wanting to open the museum and just about the museum, you keep mentioning about telling a story and how food and, the beverages and everything have a culture and a story to them. And I think that's so important because people take that all for granted. And that was actually the first thing that I wanted to do when I launched my cookbook series. Was I just felt that food tells a story, and I couldn't just put recipes in it, but I had to put stories that related to the culture, right? And that sounds like exactly, what you're recognizing, with these museums. It's really, really interesting. So, well, that's really very, very interesting. Can you tell us a little bit about the Cocktail Museum for those who may not know anything about it or haven't visited yet?
Sure. Now, let me start with the parent organization.
Yes.
Because the what the Cocktail Museum does is a more focused version of that. The Center for Culinary Culture tells the story of food and drink through exhibits, educational programming, and a range of media. That includes some writing, that includes some video production, etc. So the Cocktail Museum, it tells the story of the cocktail and all of its constituent elements, which is to say spirits and mixers.
Yes.
And we do that again through exhibits, tactile exhibits. Well, we actually don't want people touching them, but you know what I'm saying. They're three-dimensional.
Yes. And do you have exhibits that are like stationary that are there all the time?
Yes.
Kind of like, okay.
Yes,
So how do people find out about, like, if they want to visit and what type of exhibits? Is there someplace people can go or to find out?
Yes, indeed. They can go to the web and surf to culinaryculture.center. Culinaryculture.net, no.net, .center. Culinaryculture.center. Now, of course, right now we are in the midst of the COVID-19 crisis.
Yes. Yes.
So no one can go anywhere but the internet.
Exactly.
And we are in the midst of relocating. We were open in San Pedro for 2 years as the Pacific Food and Beverage Museum. San Pedro is the southern Los Angeles, and now we are relocating to a building that's much more centrally located.
Oh, okay, great. And yes, you know what? I'm just so used to normal life. So I'm thinking, travel and all that. People, where can they go to find you? And not, it's not sinking in yet that, yes, you're absolutely right. Right now, people cannot come to visit you, but when things get back to normal, and hopefully it will be soon, we will be all back to normal. That's the way that people can visit or, and find out about you by going to, tell me that URL again, culinaryculture.net.
Culinaryculture.center.
Okay, great. So people know where to find more info or to find out when they're able to visit. And then I wanted to find out, you being the expert, what would be your favorite cocktail? If you had to pick a favorite cocktail, what would that be?
Well, my standard response to that question, which, as you might imagine, is posed to me a lot, is as if. Why would I limit myself to any one cocktail?
That's true.
When there are so many wonderful cocktails out there. The nuanced answer, how is this? there are basically three categories of cocktail: stirred, shaken, and built.
Mhm.
I have a strong bias, a strong palatal bias for the stirred category.
Okay.
Often called stirred aromatic. No citrus,
Uh-huh.
no shaking, no fizziness. Some people call them adult cocktails because they're
Yes.
much more spiritful
Oh, yes.
than the old-fashioned, the Manhattan. These are the things that appeal to me
Yes.
more than other things. Although I very much enjoy and appreciate and have studied the history of the others. Stirred aromatic cocktails are my favorite. And within that, let me say my favorite one to prepare is Boulevardier. The Boulevardier first appeared in print in the 1920s. Erskine Gwynn published a periodical for expats in Paris in the 1920s. That's where it first appeared. It's more or less equal parts whiskey, typically American rye whiskey, sweet vermouth, and again, classically, Campari as the Amaro. However, I love Campari, but I love experimenting with the Boulevardier and substituting a range of Amari. I think my favorite variation is what I call the black Boulevardier, which substitutes Averna. Which is a spacious Sicilian Amaro. But I like experimenting. Amaro Foro, Ramazzotti, Jägermeister. These things are, each one, we're talking about, hundreds, perhaps thousands of permutations. Because you can change out the vermouth. There are so many wonderful sweet vermouths and dry vermouths on the market now. I mean, they're being made literally all over the world now.
Yes, they are. And well, since the show is, I mean, we're talking about beverages. Can you, but I'm focusing a little bit on coffee. Is there any type of a coffee cocktail that you can tell us about that you think is an interesting one or a delicious one for people to try or something?
Sure. Full disclosure, I'm not a big fan of coffee cocktails.
Okay.
Huge fan of coffee, though.
Yes.
And I will enjoy a Black Russian or an espresso martini. I do have a favorite coffee liqueur, and it is Borghetti, which is made by Fratelli Branca, the same people who make Net Branca.
Net Branca, yes.
And what's special about Borghetti is that it's an espresso liqueur.
Yes.
So it's much richer. It's also not terribly sweet.
Yes.
Too many of them are terribly sweet, and that's a bridge too far for me. Another favorite is Mr. Black out of Australia. They're newish, like 3 to 5 years old, I think. Excellent stuff. But Borghetti is an espresso liqueur that works very well for me. I mean, there's the Irish coffee, of course. There's
the typical,
the most famous coffee cocktail. But I think probably my favorite coffee cocktail, although some would argue it's not a cocktail because it's only 2 ingredients, is caffè corretto. Literally corrected coffee. So it's a shot of espresso plus a shot of grappa or brandy or some anisette. That's probably my favorite coffee cocktail.
Your favorite coffee cocktail. And it is, and I love your choices and your preferences, with the stirred and the cafe corretto, because I feel this sense of you like kind of the old world, things that have a history to them more so than these, the cocktails that are, I mean, there are a lot of cocktails today that are made with all kinds of, 50 different ingredients and fizzy and all this stuff. But I like that. I think that's, interesting. That's kind of like my take on food. I like simple, I think is better. So, but I think that's really interesting. Yes. Cafe corretto. I can remember my grandparents having that, after dinner. So I can still smell the anisette. Yes.
Play on words. Coffee's fine, but we can correct it.
Correct it. Yes.
We can make it right.
Make it better. Yes. Or make it correct. Exactly. Make it right. Exactly. So how about as an expert, is there any trends that you see in coffee cocktails, using coffee in cocktails? Any trends that you see that we may not be aware of that are up and coming?
The 70s presented us with a lot of Guga, in
Yes.
cocktails, and things in the 90s, with the craft cocktail renaissance, things got stripped back. We
Yes.
started learning about the history of cocktails, right? And so things got sort of back to basics. And these things come in waves, right?
Yes.
Something gets popular and some brand will appear that, that claims to do everything and take it take
Yes.
it another step. And then
Yes.
things get stripped back to basics.
Yes.
As far as identifying a trend in coffee cocktails,
Uh-huh.
the trend is back and forth.
Yes.
This is one of the reasons I like the espresso martini as much as I do. You
Uh-huh.
can have it as basic as you want. Just
Oh, yes.
espresso and vodka, a really flavorful, good mouthfeel vodka, really oily mouthfeel.
Yes.
Or you could do something that's more basic, less characterful vodka, mixed with a coffee or espresso liqueur, so that stands out. But you can also, play with it by using a hazelnut vodka, or injecting some essence or bitters to twist it. Another play on words. But do you understand where I'm going with
Yes,
that?
exactly,
It's basic.
exactly. Yes, definitely. And
It's
one
basic, but
question,
there are thousands of permutations.
yes, with a history of beverages in your expertise, do you have a favorite, something you can tell us about coffee that, people don't normally think of, like some kind of a history in the history of coffee?
Sure. So coffee originated in East Africa. That's the only place in the world where it is indigenous.
Okay.
It was exported to the Arabian Peninsula. It's thought that it was first brewed as a beverage in Yemen in the 15th century, I believe. So
Uh-huh.
not that long ago, really, in the grand scheme of things. In the
Yes.
scheme of, foodstuffs, basic foodstuffs. That's not a
Yes.
long time ago.
No.
So, and then the Dutch brought it to North America, and of course it then was cultivated in Central America and South America, spread to Asia, and the rest is history.
The rest is history. And have you heard of this thing going on now where Italy is actually trying to get a trademark on Italian espresso? Have you heard about that?
No.
Oh, yes, they're trying to trademark Italian espresso because,
Yeah.
they feel that it's part of their culture and history. So I just wanted to know.
I'm of two minds in these things.
Uh-huh.
Pride is one thing, and the importance of brand is one thing, but protectionism is another. So I'm of two minds on that. So I don't know.
Yes. No, I was just wondering. I haven't heard any updates yet, and wondering
Yeah.
if you had. So, okay. And basically what my blog is about the history of food and travel
Mm-hmm.
and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw that you had some recent tweets about Japanese spirits and
Yes,
what's
indeed.
drink. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about the drinking culture there.
Sure, absolutely. Well, Japanese drinking culture goes back many hundreds of years. Most people, when they think of Japanese spirits, think of whiskey, which is a 20th century in the drinking culture. Drinking whiskey in Japan and making whiskey in Japan is an early 20th century phenomenon. The man who brought it to Japan studied in Edinburgh. He learned to make whiskey in Scotland. He also fell in love with a lass. They married, and he brought her back to Japan. So that's what became what is now Suntory and other brands, other famous Japanese whiskey brands. So whiskey is new, but shochu and awamori, which are also distilled spirits, white spirits, go back hundreds of years. They predate whiskey by several hundred years. They are distilled from barley, distilled from rice, distilled from sweet potato, sometimes a blend of those. Awamori is made only on the island of Okinawa because the Japanese government has a consul in Los Angeles. That we've partnered with them to a degree, and now we have access to the makers of shochu and awamori.
Oh, wow. So that's because, and they have an office, you're saying, in Los Angeles. Oh,
right.
oh,
So we've
that's
done
interesting.
programming now with several of the brands.
Oh, wow.
Now, a lot of people, when they hear me say shochu, they think, oh, yeah, I've had soju. No, soju is the Korean spirit. And it tends to be much lower proof and much more mild in flavor than shochu, which is the Japanese.
The Japanese.
A lot of people say, well, is it like sake? No.
Yes.
Sake is usually largely rice fermented and then brewed, basically. Rice, sake is closer to beer than it is wine. A lot of people rice wine, but it's really rice beer. But then again, the spirits of Japan, the native spirits of Japan are shochu and awamori.
Oh, that's really very interesting. And tell me, because I've never been to Japan, so do they with coffee? So they're probably not into that at all.
Probably newly so. With the global spread of Starbucks and coffee.
Yes, that would have been a new thing. Exactly. But that is just, it's not in their culture
like
then.
Milk and cheese, it's not,
Yes, exactly. And
it can be had, but it's rarely pursued.
Yes. Yes. And it's not definitely not part of their original culture or history. So, well, that is all really, really interesting. What I always ask my guests is something that I like to know. What does food mean to you?
Okay. So food, cuisine, is a cultural expression. Eat to live? Sure, because that's the way we're made. But living to eat is much more fun.
Yes. Exactly. Yes. And I think that says it all in just that short sentence that you said. Definitely. Yes. Well, Philip, thank you so much for being a guest on the show. And as I said, I'm sure, grazie. I'm sure we will be inviting you back for another episode to share your expertise. It's always so interesting.
Happy to serve.
Yes, and hopefully soon I will be able to get out there also and visit.
Would love to have you do a presentation.
Did you know that according to Inc. magazine, there are more antioxidants in a cup of coffee than there is in a cup of grape juice? Who would have thought that? For my book, The Basic Art of Coffee, I penned a poem, sort of an homage to my favorite brew. I call it an ode to cappuccino and morning. Don't disturb me, I need to be alone. Oh, so not true, I need to be with you, my splendid cappuccino and cornetto. Thanks for joining me on this segment of the Maria Liberati Show. You can also find me at marialiberati.com, and you can find all of the Basic Art of Italian Cooking culinary travel books at Maria